Did you know that 90% of my audience isn't?
I honestly don't think that many people will be surprised to hear me say that there is a plethora of Star Wars games. They've been coming out since the 1983 arcade cabinet made by Atari, and since then over 100 video games based on the film franchise have been released. With that many games under the series belt, it's not really a surprise to anyone that several of the games have been worth much praise and even several re-releases. One of these games that was received very positively and is looked back upon fondly was the 2005 FPS Star Wars Republic Commando. One of the reasons I decided that this was the first-person shooter I was going to review on this channel is because it was supposed to be the launching point for a whole series, not just of games too, but also books, other media, just all kinds of things. But all of the other projects except for this game and a number of the books were cancelled, never seen the light of day. That being said, it really does beg the question, was this game good enough that we should have gotten more, or was this series destined to fail from the beginning? Whenever you first boot up Star Wars Republic Commando, you will notice that this game has a very dark and muted color palette. This is used to set the tone for the game as a war story about soldiers going on hardcore missions. The mission that this game sets out to accomplish is to bring a grit to the Star Wars universe by showing its players what the Clone Wars looked like from the perspective of the ground troops. This is very interesting because generally you only see it from the perspective of the high and mighty Jedi. They'll take out droids like butter, they're nothing to compared to them. But when you're with the clones, the droids are more of a threat. You actually have to consider things and implement your tactics. This means that you won't find yourself slashing through herds of battle droids, but instead you'll need to develop strategies to take care of those enemies that would normally just be like cannon fodder in any other Star Wars game. After starting your save file up, you'll be greeted by one of this game's many memorable moments and cool set pieces. An alien face that is staring you as a baby down while you sit inside of a test tube.
Casual Monday.
This scene is followed up by showing the player the main character growing up and being trained to be a soldier. I love this sequence because it does a great job of immersing you into the game's world and setting. Instead of the game simply telling you that, hey, you're a soldier and you've been training for combat since birth, it shows you growing up, training, learning about how guns and combat work, and just being taught how your squad, as well as the clone army as a whole, just functions and operates. The game shows you why your character would be loyal to this army, as it's all they've ever known. They've been conditioned since birth to be a soldier, and that means that they'll go into battle very willingly. Another reason that I really like the intro sequence in this game is that it introduces the player to this game's HUD, which is very reminiscent of something like Metroid Prime. The HUD in this game does not feel like a HUD in a video game. It represents the inside of a Delta's helmet, and the only things that it shows you are the stats of your squad, your health, and your grenade info. It all feels like stuff that would actually be inside of the high-tech helmet of a Delta Squad member. Nothing feels like it's just video game info that the developers threw in there. It all feels like stuff that would actually be helpful to have. It also helps that rain, oil, and blood all stick to the player's visor. Like the only thing that's holding you away from the game world is a thin pane of glass. Another thing that really helps to immerse you in this game's world is that each of the people in your squad has a unique and distinct skill set and personality. Sev is a combat expert who loves the fight and the feeling of crushing enemy droids. Fixer is a very skilled commando who is the second in command, but he is also quiet and wants to follow orders to the letter. Scorch may be an explosives expert, but he is also the most fun and lighthearted on the team. He's always cracking jokes, but deep underneath, he really does care for his brothers on Delta Squad. In this game, the squad really does help to build a real bond between the Deltas and the player, and it really helps to make you feel closer to this war-torn world that the game takes place in.
But we're gamers. 20-hour video essays are supposed to cover story analysis. All we care about is the gameplay.
At its core, Commando is a tactical FPS in which you control yourself in tandem with 3 other troops to use a large variety of all kinds of sci-fi weapons to win a bunch of battles for the Republic. Once you actually start playing this game, you'll realize that the gameplay has a depth to it which really ropes you in. Every aspect of the gunplay in this game is fine-tuned to be fun and satisfying, even when playing on a controller, which is how I ended up playing this game. I didn't even have to use a keyboard and mouse. This game generally handles enemy encounters in one of 2 ways. The first way is in waves that come at you in tight and claustrophobic corridors. These fights are generally tense and chaotic, with lots of damage being thrown and dealt. You'll never want to give the enemies an inch, and you'll want to stay strong and fight till the very end. The second way that this game will throw enemies at you is in an open area. These generally have lots of cover and elements that will make the fight fun. There will also be lots of enemy spawners, or places they can come at you from the sides. This makes it so that the key is to place your soldiers in places where they can deal damage and not take a lot of it. This game also has a large variety of ways that you can blow apart your enemies, but the main way that you'll probably be decommissioning droids is with the game's many guns. The most common guns you'll be using in this game fall under the category of attachment guns. You'll have one gun that you have on you at all times that has 3 separate attachments that you can shuffle through. These include the rifle attachment, which fires really fast, the sniper attachment, which is slow but has zoom and does lots of damage, or the heavy-hitting anti-armor attachment that lobs grenades at enemies. The second type of gun is probably the gun with the most variety overall, as they are non-permanent guns that can be swapped out for other non-permanent guns that will either be dropped by enemies or just left around on the battlefield. These include things such as the Geonosian laser, or the Wookiee weapons, which are heavy but hit pretty hard, or last but not least, the Trandoshan weapons, which fire actual bullets but don't deal much damage to droids. The third type of weapon is probably the weapon you'll be using the least, and it's the pistol. It's incredibly weak, but it does have infinite ammo, so it's the weapon you'll be using when everything else is gone. All of the guns in this game are really meant to complement each other. They all work so well, and most of the guns have situations in which they will be the most ideal gun to use. It's so satisfying to go from sniping a far-off enemy to mowing down B1s from behind cover with the rifle attachment. Other than the guns that are in this game, there are also grenades, melee, and turrets that can be used for attacking. The melee strike is probably the most basic of these because it just deals heavy damage to enemies in front of you. The turrets are very powerful, but they normally start with an enemy in them, so the enemy has to be taken out before they can be of any use. The grenades in this game come in several different types, each with their own distinct advantages and disadvantages. Most enemies can be taken out with a grenade, but you have to know which grenade to use on them, otherwise it's just not worth using. All of these secondary attacks, when used together with the game's guns and command system, lead to some very nuanced and fun gameplay that even someone who does not normally enjoy FPS games, like me, can find to be very fun. Alright, I do have to admit that I haven't quite talked about a big aspect of this game yet. It's really the part of this game that sets it apart from other FPS games in the Star Wars series, as well as just first-person shooters as a genre in general. That being, the way that this game has you control your soldiers using commands. Basically, the way that the system works is whenever you hold down the A button, you can press any direction in the D-pad to tell your squad what you want them to do. The options for this basically boil down to searching for enemies, securing an area, and just canceling commands that you've already issued. Other than just the basic commands that you can use in this game, you can also tell your squad to heal, target an enemy, take out a turret, get into a sniping position, hack a terminal, break down a door, and so much more. The only restraint on these is the fact that you have to have the necessary elements present in order to execute them. Another interesting aspect of how this game operates is how your character is not necessarily any better than any of the other 3 troops in Delta Squad. For example, you don't have any more health than anyone else in Delta Squad, and you're not any stronger than any of them either. Any of the boring stuff that you can do, you can have your squad mates do, and vice versa.
So you can stand still and hack a terminal, while your squad does all the fighting. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but the option is there, which is cool.
Even the various dialogue and banter that you hear from your squad throughout the game portrays you as an equal among your 4 brothers. You're their leader because that's your skill set. It's what you were trained to do, not because you're inherently better than anyone else in your squad. Another kind of thing that this game does that's kind of unique to it is how it handles getting downed or running out of health. Basically, whenever anyone in your squad's health meter reaches 0, they fall down and they can't do anything. The only way for them to get back up is for another trooper to crouch down next to them and revive them. A game is only over when everyone in your squad is downed. That makes it so that you always have to consider whether it's worth reviving someone or whether it's better to just stay alive yourself and revive them later. What makes this system work even better is that getting downed works the same for you as it does for your teammates, which means whenever you're downed, the rest of your squad continues on like normal. You have to wait for them to come and revive you. They even keep talking and bantering while you're down, because they're not talking to you specifically, they're talking to everyone on the team. All of that being said, even when you're down, the strategy doesn't really end, because you maintain some amount of control over your team. Basically, you get 2 options. You can tell your team to keep doing what they're doing, and just fight until there's an opening to come and revive you, or you can tell them to drop everything and come and revive you. This is a great option for you if you want to get right back into the action, but it's also a risk because you could lose an advantageous position, or when your teammate is coming to get you, they could get downed in the process, and now 2 people are down instead of 1. This whole process of commands and strategy leads to a unique system that has a feeling of genuine teamwork between you and your squad mates. It sometimes even feels like you're playing a multiplayer game instead of a single-player game. Honestly, I can't sing the praises of this system enough. It really leads to a game that's not only fun, but very immersive and strategic.
With all that being said, I think it's pretty obvious that this game is very fun most of the time. But there are definitely some problems that should be addressed. Just like how 90% of my viewers are...
Yeah, we need to talk about some of the ways in which this game just falls short. For example, a lot of the enemies in this game are well balanced and well utilized, but some of them are not great, like the super battle droids for example. They can really only be described as bullet sponges. It's not too bad when you have all of your squad firing at one of them, but when there's multiple, or if someone in your squad is down, it can take obnoxiously long to take one down, and it's not difficult, it's just annoying. This also plays into how the difficulty curve in this game is not really a curve, it spikes quite a bit. Sometimes the difficulty progression feels very natural, and other times it can feel like I'll go from breezing through one mission to struggling on the next with little to no build-up. Oh, and another thing that bugged me about this game is how too much dialogue can play at once. I'm pretty sure what's happening is the game's scripted dialogue is trying to play at the same time as the game's situational dialogue, but what ends up happening is unintelligible noise because they try to play over the top of each other. Not only is this ear-grating, but it also causes you to miss stories sometimes, which is annoying if you're trying to follow along. The game's controls are also kind of limiting because you can only use control presets and not custom button mappings. The game also does not support gyro aim, which is not a deal breaker, but it's a little weird that it's not there considering that the Jedi Knight 2 port does have gyro aim support. And lastly, I'd be remiss not to mention that I encountered some bugs in my playthrough, but nothing that was game-breaking, and it's all really stuff that can be easily looked past. And in the end, none of these things that the game does wrong are a deal-breaker. At its core, Republic Commando is still a very solid tactical FPS that holds up very well given how old it is. I give Star Wars Republic Commando an 8 out of 10, and I will see you all next time. Wario style, and may the Force be with you.